Hi there. My name is Sam, and today I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about physical activity. Physical activity, a few words that we seem to be hearing of less and less in today's world. You see, with me being a kinesiology major, I tend to hear of the terms health or physical activity or exercise quite often in my day to day life. But it's always pretty shocking to me to see how little people actually know of these topics outside of the health field. A lot of people do not know what proper physical activity looks like, or they might not even know about the innumerable physical and mental benefits that exercise can bring into one's life. So, what even is physical activity, and what is the difference between it and exercise? Well, when looking at the National Library of Medicine, they define physical activity as any bodily movement produced by skeletal muscles that results in energy expenditure. This is a little different from exercise, which is defined as a physical activity that is planned, structured, and repetitive, and has a final or intermediate objective for the improvement or maintenance of physical fitness. So basically, physical activity is any movement that uses energy, and exercise is a planned physical activity for the purpose of maintaining or improving one's physical fitness. So, why is all this even important? Well, first, I want to jump into an epidemiological look at physical activity and exercise throughout the United States, as the numbers are getting quite serious. According to a 2024 CDC snapshot, all U.S. states and territories had an obesity prevalence of 25% or greater. At the very minimum, 1 in 4 Americans are considered to be obese. That's at the very minimum. The Midwest and the South has the greatest obesity prevalence at around 35%, and Mississippi and West Virginia were over the 40% mark, which is crazy. There's actually a map that you can find on the CDC's website, and it shows a color coded United States based on the average obesity rate in each state. And it's quite ominous to look at because this map shows 0 green areas on it. Rather, it is just plastered with red and yellow colors on every single state. And of course, that signifies that every state is not in a good spot health wise. And if we were to take a closer look at obesity prevalence, we can see that it affects certain groups of people more so than others, and is usually tightly correlated with physical activity levels. By age, obesity is most likely to affect middle-aged adults between the ages of 40 to 50 years, with them being 30% more likely to have obesity than younger adults, and 25% more likely to have obesity than older adults. Generally, the trend that we see is that lower physical activity levels typically increase with age. And another thing of note is that just because a child is active in their younger years does not mean that they will continue to be active as they age. They might lose time, they might lose motivation along the way, they might suffer an injury that sets them back and then they don't exercise ever again, amongst many other different things. Now, by race and ethnicity, combined data from 2022 to 2024 shows lower physical activity prevalence in non-Caucasian groups, as well as a much higher obesity prevalence, specifically in Black, American Indian, Hispanic, those demographics. Obesity and physical activity also have a negative correlation regarding education level. Typically, the less education that one has, the less physical activity that one partakes in, and the higher the prevalence of obesity. This could be due to many different reasons, such as maybe lack of knowledge on how to properly go about exercising, maybe not knowing about all of the health benefits implicated with physical activity, or maybe even their education affecting their income and them not being able to afford a membership to a gym or facility. And lastly, it is worth noting that nearly 50% of Americans do not meet the physical activity guidelines for Americans. And that states that one should get at least 150 minutes of moderate intensity aerobic activity or 75 minutes of vigorous aerobic activity per week. This percentage goes down even more if we look at both aerobic and muscle strengthening guidelines, which only about a quarter of Americans meet those guidelines. Okay, so the majority of Americans are not partaking in enough physical activity. Why does this matter? Why is this a bad thing? And why should Americans want to change this? For starters, let's dive into some of the health complications that lack of exercise can bring about. As a general overview, low levels of physical activity and poor diet choices account for at least 300,000 preventable deaths in the United States alone, with some of those numbers being as high as 365,000. These deaths stem from the multitude of different diseases that come with inactivity and bad diet. Some of these diseases include coronary heart disease, type 2 diabetes, metabolic syndrome, hypertension, stroke, many different types of cancers, osteoporosis. The list really just goes on and on. Lack of physical activity increases the risk of all-cause mortality by a staggering amount, which is up to 40%. Lack of physical activity can also lead to obesity, which obesity by itself is a huge risk factor for all of the diseases previously listed, and that is why I made sure to hammer home all of those obesity metrics. An interesting fact about obesity is that the medical cost in obesity in the US alone in 2005 was $190 billion. And since 2005, it has only gotten worse. But a huge reason that we are seeing all of these numbers is due to people's occupations requiring less and less movement and focusing more so on mental faculties. The increased stress in our current climate can lead to loss of motivation to exercise. Cities are becoming more and more vehicle focused, which leads to less people walking, less people biking, less people just doing activity in general. And the cost of gym memberships have also been rising, and that of course leads to less members, so on and so forth. What's crazy about all this though is that it does not take much exercise per week to greatly reduce one's risk of all-cause mortality, as well as to help reverse a lot of the diseases that we've mentioned. If you were to go from completely sedentary, meaning you do absolutely nothing, to just a few hours of non-vigorous physical activity every week, you would be decreasing your risk of all-cause mortality by a massive 20%, according to the International Journal of Epidemiology. Of course, for the most part, the further you go with exercise, the more that risk drops. On top of all of that, the amount of physical benefits alone that one can extract from physical activity is staggering. Of course, exercise can help to reduce the risk of chronic diseases that were listed earlier. In fact, this one's crazy. Physical activity can positively modify up to 65% of total deaths every year in the United States. Again, physical activity could positively modify up to 65% of total deaths every year in the United States. An example of a death that physical activity could not modify would be accidents, for example. And in general, exercise helps to improve cardiorespiratory fitness, it helps to improve metabolic health, it helps to improve musculoskeletal health and preserve bone mass, improve body composition, flexibility, as well as improve functional capacity in older adults. One of the biggest issues that older adults face is falling, and through aerobic and anaerobic activity, they can improve their balance, their coordination, their strength, their endurance, and all of these things lead to a greater reduction in falls. Basically, exercise just leads to an overall improved quality of life and health profile. Now, the amount of physical benefits that come from exercise is massive, but the amount of mental and neurological benefits that stem from it is equally as staggering. Let's dive into a few. The first is reduced stress. So, physical activity can help to stimulate the release of hormones, such as serotonin, into the body, which can help one to feel more at ease. Exercising can also help to prepare you for the mental stresses that you will encounter throughout your entire day. Exercise also increases the amount of blood flow to the brain. This increased blood flow helps to promote what's called neurogenesis, or the growth of new brain cells. These brain cells, of course, are our neurons. Neurogenesis is crucial for many different processes, such as mood regulation, improving memory, repairing neural pathways, learning, much, much more. Simply put, your brain loves it when you partake in physical activity. Another huge one with exercise is it being able to combat both anxiety and depression. Sometimes, exercise can be a more effective strategy to combating these than medicine or therapy itself, hence where the term exercise is medicine comes from. The first way that it accomplishes this is down on a personal level. Any sort of exercise can show someone perceptions of improvement, help to positively change their self-identity, give them feelings of achievement, and improve their self-efficacy. This is especially true once they start to see the changes in themselves. Whether it's in a mirror, maybe they'll see something on a scale, they might just see strength and endurance gains, all of those things. They can all help to lead to an improvement in self-confidence, as well as an enhanced mood. You can think of it almost like a snowball effect. You start to see changes, and then those changes make you feel good in one area, which in turn makes you feel good in another area, and it just goes on from there. Yet another benefit that stems from physical activity is improved sleep. As you exercise, your heart begins to work more efficiently. An effect from this is a lowered overall resting heart rate, and this plays a humongous role in getting quality sleep. Another thing is that research has shown in general that moderate aerobic activity can help to increase the overall amount of slow wave sleep that you get. And this slow wave sleep is also known as deep sleep. Deep sleep is where a lot of the body's recovery happens, allowing for the brain and body to have a chance to rejuvenate. One thing of note here is just to make sure you don't exercise too close to bed. Exercising stimulates your sympathetic nervous system, which in turn raises your heart rate, elevates your core body temperature, makes you more alert, amongst other things. And where we see the improved sleep quality is after we let our body cool down from exercise and after we let the parasympathetic nervous system take back over. The neat thing about all of this, all of these neurological and mental benefits that come from any sort of exercise, they come from any sort of exercise, whether it's aerobic or anaerobic, and it also does not matter where you are at in your exercise journey, whether you've been lifting for 10 years or not at all. Anyone can derive all of these benefits from physical activity, maybe except for the non-believers who choose not to participate in physical activity at all. Speaking of non-believers, how can we go about promoting new and existing physical activity programs for people who might be doing just a little or maybe nothing at all? Well, I feel like the first thing we need to look at is effectiveness versus efficacy. Quoted from lecture, efficacy basically represents whether an intervention will produce expected results under ideal circumstances. Effectiveness measures the relative degree that something will be beneficial or work under real-world circumstances. So one is basically like in a lab, and the other one's real world. Basically, something might look good on paper, but might not actually work in the real world. So what we need to do is find effective ways to initiate or promote physical activity programs using different models and theories. And the first one I would like to talk about is what's called the trans-theoretical model. This is basically a framework that shows where an individual is regarding their psychological readiness for change using 5 main stages. And these stages are pre-contemplation, contemplation, preparation, action, and maintenance. It showcases that behavior change is not a simple process, but rather is gradual and follows a series of steps. Once you can pinpoint exactly where they are in the model, you can then go about finding the best interventions to get them to their goal. For example, If someone is sedentary and they want to exercise, but they have no motivation to do so, then they would be in the contemplation stage of the trans-theoretical model. Based on this, you could find different gentle strategies to help push them into the next stages of the model, and eventually, hopefully, they would hit their goal of exercising. One effective strategy that could be implemented into this model is called tiny experiments. And these are just little things that you can do in your daily life to help perpetuate feelings of achievement, success, promote discipline, and ultimately get you closer to your goal. If you wish to adopt a more active lifestyle, for example, you could start with small things like maybe parking a few extra rows away from the grocery store, or if your elevator only takes you up 1 or 2 floors, opt to take the stairs instead. Maybe even ask a friend to join you for a short walk just once or twice a week. And these little things can help to create a snowball effect that will lead, hopefully, to bigger and more meaningful change. Another model that we can look at is what is called the socio-ecological model of health. Basically, it's a layered health model that states that in order to achieve sustainable changes in behavior, intervention efforts must focus on individuals within the population of focus at their surrounding levels of influence. An individual does not just exist by themselves. They are influenced by their surrounding environment. Now, this model has 4 levels that intervention efforts should aim to impact. And these levels are the individual, relationships, community, and society. We could help to promote physical activity programs on each and every one of these levels. On the individual level, for example, we could create public education campaigns that go into detail about why physical activity is good and how you could go about starting physical activity. On the relationships level, we could promote different health clubs, like, for example, maybe a walking or a running club, or sports clubs. We could also encourage parents to spend more time being active with their kids. On the community level, we could integrate more school activity policies, such as maybe longer recesses or more active classrooms. We could also create partnerships with community centers that provide affordable or maybe even free access to fitness programs. Lastly, on the societal level, one very simple one is just making sure that there are sidewalks and bike lanes around town. And you could amplify these by making sure that the bike lanes are safe and well lit. You could also figure out ways to get local businesses to partner up and maybe sponsor some local races or just fitness events in general. One thing I wanted to mention is that one of the slides from lecture also pointed out some different interesting ways to promote physical activity within a community. And it mentioned some different community prompts and activities that will get people to be active, such as maybe a skating rink in Triangle Park or new bike lanes opening up across the city. The slides also showcased a video of something very interesting, which was called Piano Stairs. It showed a flight of stairs located within a city that also had an escalator right next to the stairs. And of course, most people just opted to go up the escalator rather than taking the stairs, and a group of people wanted to change that. What they ended up doing was they ended up making the stairs look like piano keys, and they also made them interactive so that whenever people stepped on them, they would play a little piano key noise. After this was done, people actually started to take the stairs more often, and they would be seen running up and down the stairs, jumping on them, doing all sorts of different things on the stairs just to hear the piano noises. And it was interesting because what this showcased is that was a very simple way to get people to enjoy physical activity, and that's because they made it fun and enjoyable. Without funness and enjoyableness, a lot of people might not be willing to participate in physical activity. And that is why I think it is so important for cities and communities to have fun ways for people to get active. For instance, of course, skating rinks, parks, bowling alleys, things of that nature. Actually, that's how I managed to get involved in my own exercise journey. Around the age of 16, I always loved to hang out with my friends after school. We would play video games, we'd go for walks around the neighborhood, play sports in the backyard, things of that nature. And one day, we all decided to try out a free trial at a gym. On our first day there, we really had no idea what we were doing, but the key point is that we had fun there and we enjoyed everyone's company. And because of this, we ended up going back to the gym the next time we all hung out. We continued to do this, and we managed to improve our form every time we went back, and eventually, we were fully consistent at the gym. Not only does this showcase how important it is to make physical activity fun, but it also shows how important having social support is for physical activity. Having someone there to partake in physical activity with you to talk with maybe, or to give you positive feedback and reassurance can be the difference between exercising and not exercising. Having social support makes sure someone is there to hold you accountable. And a lot of times the single greatest predictor of is the single greatest predictor of exercise adherence. Social support also plays a huge role in the self-efficacy theory, which talks about how the belief in one's ability to succeed determines how they approach and perform with challenges. If you have people there to uplift you and to push you through your goals, of course, you are going to be way more likely to achieve them. If there's one thing to take away from all of this, it's that physical activity and exercise is not a punishment, but rather it's a blessing that we can all use to help further ourselves as well as others. Your future self will look back with gratitude that you decided to make a move, that you decided to take that first small step. And it doesn't have to be big, it just has to be your step. This spark that starts your fitness journey might actually be just right in front of you. And I hope that maybe this short talk might be able to help you recognize that and maybe help you start a wonderful journey towards empowerment and longevity. Thank you.